We're gonna mostly talk about fixed rate bonds, and I'll also show you kind of how to uh, value tips as well. It's not that complicated, at least at this level. But we'll also talk about properties of different kinds of bonds. You may have bonds that are collateralized by a property, so called mortgage bonds. If the issuer doesn't pay back, you can use that collateral to recover to the extent possible what's owed to you. You can have bonds there are even some huge bonds. For example, there are bonds that are linked to a catastrophic event. Typically, insurance, especially reinsurance companies, issue these. They're called cat bonds. Cat is short for catastrophe. I'm going to pay you high interest rate, but if a big hurricane happens in Florida, given the damage, I'm going to start reducing it. I'm basically buying insurance from people against hurricane. But I'm a reinsurance company. That means I already sold that insurance to other people. So I'm doing that to cover myself. There is even a type of bond called, uh, it has a very funny and long official name, but colloquially they're known as debt bonds. These bonds kind of, I mean, there is no limit to financial engineering. They kind of became the thing when the AIDS epidemic was started in the 1980s. Let's say you're an AIDS patient, you were diagnosed with HIV, and back in the 1980s, that was the death. Typically, you die within 0 to because you lose your entire immune system unless you're in a bubble. You're gonna get something and die from it. And suppose I had a 10-year term life insurance. That means if I die within those 10 years, the insurance company is going to pay me, let's say, $1 million. And the trouble is, I need the money now, and I don't particularly care what my grandkids get after I die. And remember, there was no Obamacare back in the 1980s, so you had to see it, right? And hospitals, as they are now, were expensive. Medical care is ridiculously expensive in the United States for all slew of reasons. That is not a topic of this class. And this very clever, but maybe somewhat unethical, uh, at least ghoulish financial engineer decided, okay, I'm going to go to these people, like analysts, chiefs, and lawyers. I'm going to go to hospitals and find the age patients and tell them, do you need life insurance? The answer is yes. How about you make me the beneficiary of that life insurance? From now on, I'm going to pay any premiums that will be due until you die. When and if you die, I'm going to collect the benefit. But for this privilege, I'm going to pay you some money right now. Of course, if I do this for a lot of different people, I'm going to put them together as a pool. I don't have the money to pay these people. I'm going to issue a bond, and people are just going to basically buy the pieces of that. It may sound very unethical, but financially speaking, it has a place in a portfolio. Why? We'll talk more about this when we cover in chapter 11 and 12. The risk associated with that bond has nothing to do with the bond itself. So it helps you diversify your portfolio. And they tend to have a higher rate of return and a risk that is completely uncorrelated with the rest of your portfolio. That's always good to reduce the overall risk of a portfolio. In fact, if this was an MBA class, I would have probably asked you to write an essay to make an argument whether this is an ethical practice. When I taught the MBA classes, I always had these. I made a statement. You randomly were assigned in favor or against, and you were supposed to make an argument values to pay them. But I stopped teaching the MBA classes because a lot of those students think they're entitled to an A, and just to put them in their places, I used to take the final exam from my business 302 and give them the same final exam. My business 302 students did better because a lot of them don't have business backgrounds. It's I kind of gave up doing that because if I kept doing it, we would not have had an MBA program if I were to keep my standards. So as soon as I could, I said, thank you, because you have to apply to be an MBA faculty. They cannot make you. And as soon as my term expired, I chose not to apply again. All right. Uh, Today we're going to talk mostly about fixed rate bonds, fixed rates, fixed face value bonds. I'm going to describe what face value means. Most bonds you're going to encounter are fixed rate bonds of this type. Treasury bonds are like that. Most corporate bonds are like that, at least in the US. You'll see quite a bit of floating rate bonds in Europe. 'Cause that's kind of how the debt markets works in Europe. On a fixed rate bond, first thing we're going to define is face value. This is both kind of a unit of accounts. I measure everything in units of $1,000, just like, you know, the US currency has units of $1, right? And this is also the final payment at maturity. Unless I tell you otherwise, you should always assume that's 1,000 because that's kind of the practice in the US. Next, maturity date. Last date for payments. After that maturity date, once all the required payments have been made, the bond ceases to exist. If it was defaulted, obviously the bond is still there as a claim on the issuer. That's the last date of, I'm sorry, promised payments. Just because it's promised doesn't mean that it is get. That is especially true for bonds of issue other than Treasury or federal government in the US case. By the way, as a kind of side thing, technically speaking, US Treasury does not have authority to print the bonds. That authority lies with the Federal Reserve. Technically speaking, it's a private institution. It is owned by the member banks that are owned by other banks, but by its charter, so it's federal functions. On the other hand, U.S. Treasury has authority to mint coins. You know that silver dollar you get, or Susan B. Anthony $1 coin. And these days, if you get change from a post office, they actually give you $1 coins. Yeah. They do exist. And there's even a $half coin, quarter, yada yada yada. They're all issued by the Treasury. Technically speaking, Treasury can say, I am issuing minting a coin that is 1 trillion. I'll just make it a big coin as big as this, maybe out of gold, I don't know, and just put $1 trillion on it. As soon as you do that, that's legal currency. Treasury can take that deposit in the Federal Reserve in their account, and Federal Reserve can make payments on behalf of Treasury using that. So in that sense, U.S. Treasury would never ever default. Of course, that could create very high inflation, which U.S. Treasury works at midpoints without actually any income backing that up. But default itself is not going to happen. We're going to have something called coupon rate, percentage of face value that is paid to lenders uh, on a 12-month period. So coupon rate is 10%, face value is 1,000. Every 12-month period, uh, you're going to get $100 in payments. Okay. Coupon frequency, number of payments, these are equal over a 12-month period. Most US bonds are semi-annual, and we're going to designate that coupon frequency with the small case letter F. Semi-annual means every 6 months.